Hello, I thought I'd answer your question about morphpad automation recording. You're absolutely right. It is not very well documented at all. Some of the features in the morphpads window I only know about because Magix did a webinar at some point about it. And they just kind of mentioned it briefly in there. So I'm going to walk you through just a couple of little tricks about morphpad and how you can get, I guess, some more functionality out of it than you probably were aware of. So I've got a little dummy project here with a loop in it across a few tracks, and what we're going to do is we're going to just mess around with morphpads and just show you some use cases. I guess the first tip is you don't need to add in morphpads to all of your tracks and the master bus every time, so you can just enable this activate morphpads option here under the edit menu, and there's also something under preferences, although I can never remember where it is. Oh, there we go. Add morphpads automatically to every project. I would suggest, if you're not planning on using morphpads in a project or by default, to just have this disabled. And the reason for that is you get some really weird like anomalies with morphpads. If, let's say, you decide to, or you accidentally remove the morphpads effect off of one of the tracks, it will kind of work for a little bit, like acid will be fine, but when you next load acid and load the project, you'll find that you'll likely get just static noise when you play the project. So if you're not using morphpads all the time, disable that option, and then you can, if you decide you want to use them, you can come into, as I say, the edit menu and click activate morphpads. However, you might need to click that a couple of times because sometimes it adds the effects to any buses and tracks, and sometimes it doesn't. Fun and games. Okay, so assuming you've got that option enabled, as you've already found out, you have a morphpad plugin on all of your audio tracks, and I think they get added to buses as well. Let's test that theory out. Insert MIDI track. Yep, they do. Okay, we don't need that for this. So the important thing to remember here is where the morphpad plugin sits in a chain. So obviously the audio that comes out or is fed into the morphpad plugin is the thing you're affecting later when we start looking at the actual pads. So you might want it at the start, you might not want it at the start. Just be mindful of where you're putting it in your effects chain. And then if we have a look at the master bus, this window needs to be quite large, as I'm sure you've seen. So we're coming in here and looking at some of the templates. So these get applied. We select which track or bus we want to apply this effect to. So let's just get this loop playing, and actually let's turn the volume down a little bit. Okay, so I'm just using some of these stock options here. Right, we're not getting anything because we haven't selected a track to affect. We'll just affect the master bus. It's going to affect all the tracks equally. We don't have to do that, of course. We can it's probably not the best track to pick, is it? So you can pick which track you want to do, and obviously you can have multiple instances of a morphpad, and you can affect specific tracks on those. So if we go to high pass, and we'll put that on the bass, it's quite a powerful feature. I think it's similar to, if you've used Ableton Live, it's similar to macros in Ableton Live, or it would be if it worked a little bit better. But I can certainly see where Magics are going with this. It's similar to macros. Right, now if you want to record envelopes of those automation envelopes, this is where it kind of gets a bit messy, and it really only, I think, works if you want to record the automation. You're never going to want to edit it, just because the master bus track gets very noisy and very difficult to edit very quickly. But how we do that is, we have the automation button here. Obviously it moves a little bit if we expand this out, but if we just click that, and we'll see, the way you can tell that it's enabled is the volume slider turns red. But essentially what's going to happen now when we play is any automation or any parameters we change will get saved automatically into an automation envelope. So what I think you were doing previously is you were looking at the manually configuring FX automation and looking at this stuff, and this is a real mess and doesn't make, I mean, who knows what any of that stuff is, right? So we don't need to faff about with that at all. We just basically click on the automation settings. Volume slider is going to go red. We hit play now, and if we move any of these sliders, we'll see that an automation envelopes get written in. Okay, and if we add another one in, we see 2 more envelopes get written in, and I'm sure you can see just how difficult it will be to go in and edit those envelopes after the fact. And then once you've done that, always remember to click on the FX or the automation settings button again. The volume slider will go back to its normal color, and then we have automation. Cool. Okay, so that's that. One other thing I wanted to show you is, let's get rid of that. Come into here. We'll activate the morphpads again. Right, so the other thing we can do in here is we can actually come in and create presets and edit presets. And this is the kind of, in quotes, hidden function. So if you hit Shift F10 whilst in this window, we get the preset mode pop up. So in here we can load presets. I guess it's just the same as at the top, and we can save them, but also we can edit patches. And this is where it gets interesting. So this is fairly self-explanatory, I guess, if you're used to other applications that allow you to set up audio routing. But we can come in here, select a plugin, and what's interesting is this whole plugin interface. What we're saying here is the plugins we've got enabled in the plugin manager. It's not any different. It's just presented in a different way. And so what we can do in here, obviously, this view isn't great. But what we can do in here is we can, what do I want? I want internal filter. Another example of how this isn't great is I've double clicked it, but you can't see that it's added it, but it has. I'm going to double click and add another one, and then hit the add selected plugin button again to remove the window. Oh, I actually did only add one. Let's do it again. Yeah, sorry. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a DJ fader, I guess. So we can route audio through these two filters. These are very basic, like low pass, band pass, high pass filters. And we can set these up. And what's interesting that you can't do anywhere else in Acid is you can do these in parallel. So you can do them in a serial manner like that, which is kind of how the rest of filters work in Acid. If we can chain them together like this. This interface is awful. Or we can actually do them in parallel. So we can split the audio out into two different plugins at the same time, and then we can merge them back up again for the audio output. If you've got a plugin that supports MIDI, then obviously you can deal with that as well. I'm not really sure how MIDI works within the context of the morphpad, but functionally it's there. Right, and then once you've got these plugins set up, it's just a case of double clicking on them to open the window up. These are in quotes internal filters, so they're not actually available through the normal plugin manager. But actually there's some quite nice little filters in there, so and they're low on resource usage as well. It doesn't come with a fancy interface, but most of the time you don't need that, so that's fine. Another thing you might have noticed is we can have multiple windows open at the same time, which is pretty amazing. And this works for any normal plugin. It's not just these internal filters. So let's get our Pro C, and that supports two different audio inputs. Although with morphpads, I'm not sure that you can actually have two different audio inputs on it. It doesn't actually support like side chaining. But we could, and we can open that as well as any other plugin as well. So in some ways, this view is really good and really powerful, especially if you need to have multiple windows open at the same time. But the way that automation is recorded it kind of just nullifies any benefit you get from using this, in my opinion. Right, so anyway, in this instance, we want to set up, like as I mentioned, like a DJ filter, where if we have it in any of the corners, let's say this corner will be low pass, and this will be high pass, and this will be both of them. Right, so what we're going to do is let's just get this playing again so we can at least hear it. And the way this works, the way we save the settings from these plugins is really simple. We just basically move the morphpad to a corner and then set it up how we want it set up. Set the parameters for each plugin, and those settings automatically get saved to a corner. So let's start with the first corner. We want this to be high pass. Okay, so let's just replicate that for each of the corners. And for this top corner, we want it in high pass, but we actually want it filtering. And then for the top corner, we want it high pass and we want it filtering. Right, for the bottom corner, for the low pass, we want it like that. Fine, and then that corner, we want it like that. Okay, or maybe we don't want it quite. We have it halfway for both of these. We've still got a bit of sound coming through. Right, now when we move the morphpad, we see we're getting our effect set up, and we've basically created our own morphpad. Now, in the same window, Shift F10, we can now save that as an FXG preset. I'm not sure what FXG stands for in this instance, but once you've saved it, you will see it in this drop down list. Here's one that I created earlier. And that's it. Yeah. Hopefully it's been useful, and I'll see you next time on the forums.